Hello, everybody. I must say it's very nice to see so many people here. I wasn't sure how many people were going to come. I know there's lots of things happening today, so I feel privileged that you've taken the time to come and hear me speak again. My name is Paul Tierney, as it says on the board there, and I am really delighted to be back at Fashion Forward Season 3. I can't believe it's in Season 3 now. It's going from strength to strength, I'm sure you'll agree. Very nice to see that this event, has been successful and it is having ongoing success. So I was last here in November. I don't know how many people saw me speak then. I delivered a lecture entitled How to Be a Fashion Journalist. And I tried, hopefully succeeded within the hour that I had in trying to kind of encapsulate what it is, or what it takes rather, to become a successful fashion journalist. Kind of the nuts and bolts of the job that I do, and hopefully try to inspire people and give you some kind of insight. You can actually see it online. If you go to YouTube, it's on there, Fashion Forward, How to Be a Fashion Journalist. I've seen it once. It's not very good watching yourself back on video. My family watch it all the time. When there's nothing on TV, my dad and my aunties like to watch it and criticize me afterwards. I also did another thing last time. I chaired a debate between a fashion blogger and a magazine editor. You might have seen that. We did something about the difference between print journalism and digital journalism. Hopefully that was successful as well. They were both very enthusiastically received. I got lots of emails, lots of messages, lots of tweets last time. So that's really good. It's nice to know that you kind of come a long way to do this, that it is making some sort of impact. I do hope that the main thing that I bring is kind of some inspiration. I don't really want to come across as a sort of an academic person that's telling you rules and regulations, because of course, when we're talking about matters like this in the kind of creative industry, it's all to do with like your own personal circumstances, but there's always something that you can glean and take away. So hopefully that's what will happen today. Anyway, like I say, I'm thrilled to be back. This time I'm delivering another lecture, and as you probably know, and this is why you've come, it's called Writer versus Stylist, which is right for you. It's essentially what I would like to try and put across with this talk is, I get a lot of people, as you know, not only am I a journalist and an editor, I'm also a university lecturer, and of course I teach fashion journalism at degree level, at MA level in the UK, and also teach short courses to the general public, people that want to become either, a fashion writer or a blogger. But when people are starting off, and it was the same for me when I was a student, I think there's this kind of period in time where you don't feel fully confident as a writer to kind of launch yourself into industry and say, I'm ready to be a writer and I've got all the skills needed to be a successful freelancer. I think some people are interested in fashion publishing, if you like, the whole kind of gamut of what it takes to put a magazine together. And of course, if you think about magazines, it's made up of words and images. And of course, the other flip side of the coin to writing is styling. And I think at that kind of formative stage, some people do struggle with the idea of what to do, what is right for them. I think, if we try to break it down today, if you like, between the two mediums, between actually what it takes to put words down on a computer or a typewriter. This is a real thing, believe it or not. I found this online. This is an old-fashioned Victorian typewriter that you can electronically connect an iPad with. So, it's a bit of a novelty, but you can actually type on these keys and it will come up onto the screen. Don't think I'm going to be using one, but I like the way it looked. But yes, the difference between what it takes to be sitting down, working on a screen, producing words, and the other side of the coin is the styling element, where really all you need is one of those most of the time when you're gathering all that excess material and making somebody look really slim. These are undoubtedly the most essential thing in a stylist tool bag. But I always say, and I did say this last time, and I try to sort of press this point, is that when I say I'm a fashion journalist, it's not the only thing that I write about. I always say that I treat fashion as a kind of lifestyle thing. Fashion for me is much more than just clothes. It's about people and places and music and architecture and all kinds of things. With my line of work and with what I do now, I freelance for lots of magazines, a few newspapers. I edit a style magazine. Each day is different. So one day I might be interviewing a big fashion designer, somebody like Riccardo Tisci, or somebody that's very much out there doing their own thing. The next thing I might be writing a travel piece. I've just been to Budapest in Hungary, writing about the Grand Hotel Budapest, which is the new Wes Anderson film, and about the hotel that it's based upon. So travel, architecture, film, they all kind of like interlink for me, and I kind of like to see the connection between all of them. I'm as happy listening to kind of young musicians wax lyrical about their work as I am sort of writing my own column for Grazia in the Middle East. I do an opinion column for Grazia. So in any one kind of week or month, I'm doing all kinds of things. I'm critiquing, I'm recommending, I'm reporting facts, I'm relaying those facts to the general public, I'm picking up news stories. I'm generally spending the majority of my time sat at a computer with my fingers kind of nervously hovering over the keys, wondering what I'm going to say at any given time. Basically, in short, I'm a writer. I mean, I think that's what it boils down to. You could give me any number of sort of fancy names, but at the end of the day, I'm a kind of jobbing writer. And I have been doing it for quite a long time now, longer than I care to think, really. It's over 25 years. I know I don't look that old. That's the beauty of retouching, makes you look a lot younger. And at this stage, hopefully I'll be doing it in another 25 years as well. I hope I've got that in me. At this stage in my life, I can't really see myself swapping roles or doing anything else. You do hear about people that make these amazing career changes at the age of 50 or even 60, and they suddenly decide to completely give up their job and do something different. For me, that would be a little bit of a fantasy. I know it's possible, but I guess I'm stuck with writing. I'm just about getting used to the fact that people seem to kind of like what I do. I get a certain amount of plaudits, which is always lovely. You forget that as a writer, not everybody is rushing up to you to tell you how much that they love your work. Even your editors, you kind of deliver your copy, and that's it. You never get any feedback. The readers, you never meet them on the street. They can't tell you how much they like your work or don't like it. So you kind of just have to be glad that it got printed and be happy with that, basically. Anyway, yeah, like I say, I'm stuck with writing. I can't see myself doing anything else. I can't imagine being a used car salesman or, I don't know. I think I'm stuck with writing. Essentially, I made a decision in my early 20s to aim to be as good as possible at something in one area, and that was writing. If you remember anyone that was here last time, I was telling anecdotes about how I got to be a journalist and how I started, and it's kind of, I don't know whether it's ironic, but it's kind of weird that I've ended up teaching at London College of Fashion, because that's actually where I studied a long time ago as well, and I actually studied fashion journalism, so I kind of stuck at it. But the course that I did back then wasn't as developed as they are now. I mean, there weren't even degrees back then that actually you could do, a 2-year course in fashion journalism. You certainly couldn't do a degree in it. But it was very similar to what I teach my undergraduates now. And if you do a 3-year course in fashion journalism, you're not just sitting there writing all the time. There are aspects of other things that happen. Basically we try to give students the opportunity to try out their skills before they go out to industry. And of course, one of the things that everybody wants to do is to try styling. You know, that some girls, some boys, they don't want to be writers, they want to be fashion editors. They don't mind writing, but they don't think it's their forte, and they'd like to try styling and to see whether they're any good at it. So we give them the opportunity to style shoots. They do it in the first year, second year. In the third year, when you're compiling your final major project, which is normally producing a magazine, you have to do 3 or 4 shoots. You have to art direct them, you have to find a photographer, you have to actually, you know, borrow all the clothes and style it. And that's what I did when I left. I decided that I would do a quite adventurous shoot for my final major project, and I did it with my flatmate at the time, a guy called David Sims, who's gone on to become a hugely important photographer. Not that I knew it at the time, and unfortunately for me, when I was working with him, he wasn't quite at his peak at that time, so I kind of missed the boat on that one. But I had a set of pictures that I did for my project, and I did little bits of, you do test shoots, you know, you go out with a photographer's assistant, or you use the studio time that's left at the end of a session, and you know, you manage to kind of persuade the model, can we just do some test shots? So I managed to get together a very kind of meager portfolio of test shots, and I decided, because all I had writing-wise at that stage was a few little tear sheets that I'd garnered from doing work experience at magazines like ID and The Face, and they were little kind of this much, you know, few column inches stuck into a portfolio. It was never going to get me my dream job. I was never going to become the staff writer at the Sunday Times. It wasn't going to happen. And I was realistic about that. And I thought maybe styling something I could get into. So very naively, I took my test shoots in my portfolio. Everyone used to walk around with those little black leather portfolios in the 80s, models, stylists. If you walk down the King's Road in Chelsea with your portfolio, you really felt like somebody. Now, of course, everything's digital and it translates in a very different way. But I felt quite cool back then, walking around, going to see agents in the hope that they would take me on and represent me as a stylist. Again, very naive. I didn't get laughed out of the door, but very politely declined a number of times. And I think this is... you know, this is the case. You've got to be really realistic about it. I think for me, I just felt like styling at that point felt more collaborative. You know, I felt like I was working or would be working within a team of people. And of course you are. There's the photographer, makeup artist, hairstylist, assistants. There's music on in the studio. It's very buzzy. You really feel like you're part of something, a collaborative process. It's very creative. Whereas writing, anyone that's ever done it knows it's a very solitary profession where you are sat, you know, looking at a wall basically, and it's not much fun. So, you know, I thought styling was a way of kind of flexing my creative muscles. Sadly, didn't come true. So basically, I just failed at that, and I spent the next sort of 5 or 6 years really sort of scratching out a living as a writer. And I think if you listen to my last talk, I did say that I spent a long time doing other jobs to supplement my income. And that's another story, but you know, you have to be realistic about this. So when I'm telling my students now about the good old, bad old days and about how it was for me, it's going to be very much like that for them too. I always make this analogy, if you like, that I say to a group of students, okay, imagine this room is a magazine office, and you have, let's split it down the middle, and on the left-hand side, you've got the fashion department, okay, fashion being the visual side, where you've got the fashion editors, the fashion director, stylists, basically, people whose job it is to produce stories, pages that will go in the magazine. Okay, it's all about clothes, basically. It's all about creating arresting images. On this side of the room, you have the kind of editorial side where it's about words, basically. It's about text. It's about finding stories. It's about sitting down, researching, writing, interviewing. Got nothing to do with nice pictures. If that's what you're interested in, get on that side of the room, okay? So you've got two very, very separate sides. You've got words on one side and clothes on the other. People that like to sit there bashing at a typewriter, thinking of beautiful sentences, how to express themselves, being funny, being witty, being kind of intelligent in their thoughts. You've got other people on this side that love to style. They love the tangible kind of aspect of picking up cloth, manipulating it, doing things with accessories, doing things with, doing incredibly creative, innovative work, okay? Now, I always say to students, you've got to decide which side of the room you want to be on from this very, very early stage. Do you want to be a writer or do you want to be a stylist? Because, in my humble opinion, I don't think the two worlds collide very well at all. I think you're either one thing or another, and you have to kind of make that decision quite early. And this upsets people. This always upsets people. It always makes them feel like at a very early stage that they have to make this kind of important decision. What if they're not sure? I always get arms being, put up saying, but Paul, I know people that do both. My friend works for this magazine and she writes the interviews and she does some styling. Sometimes that's the case. You'll find that the smaller the magazine, the more that is likely to happen. Okay? If there are not many people around to do the work, you'll find that it's all hands on deck. The bigger the publication, the roles are much more defined. And if you're going to be a writer and you want to get into the editorial features side, that's the bit that you have to kind of work towards. You can't one day just switch onto fashion. So I think if you're aiming high and you're aiming to work for a premium publication, then you need to kind of work out quite quickly which side of the fence you're on. It sounds harsh. I mean, I get people getting quite upset, getting quite frustrated, but this is what I think, okay? I can only go on what I think and say. But of course, that's a very subjective opinion, and I didn't want to come here today and ram that down people's throats and leave people thinking, well, I'm scuppered now. I wanted to be a stylist, but I thought I could do a bit of writing as well. Of course you can. There's no set rules. I've just never met a writer that can style or a stylist that can write. Simple as that. They might be a little bit mediocre at both of them, but I've never met anyone that's ultimately fantastic at both of those mediums. Okay? So that's just my opinion. And I thought if I came here today, it might be a little bit inedible if I just sort of blurted my opinions and left everyone feeling a bit depressed. So I thought I would ask some industry professionals what they thought as well. Managed to get through to some really high-profile people and just ask them some very simple questions. And the results are quite surprising. Some people agree with me, some people don't. The first person I thought that I would speak to was one of my editors. I work for this lady, Katie Grand, who's the editor-in-chief of Love magazine. So Love's like Britain's premier premium style Bible, if you like. It's published by Condé Nast, and it's the only style magazine in the UK that makes any profit whatsoever, which is a really surprising statistic. But I am lucky enough to work on this. I write features for Katie. I used to work for Pop magazine, which was the magazine that she had beforehand. But Katie, as you know, is a stylist, essentially. She styles the Prada show, she styles Marc Jacobs. She's, for want of a better word, a super stylist. And she's made her name in that arena. But really cleverly, she decided that she wanted to start a magazine. So that's why she did Pop and got an independent publisher to put that together. And then Condé Nast saw how good she was at being an editor and gave her this magazine to play with, which has become very successful. So Katie said to me very briefly, because she's a busy lady, she doesn't think it's good, never good, to spread yourself too thin. And I think that sort of speaks for itself. If you try to be too many things all at once, you're really not going to shine, I don't think. Very simple way of looking at things. I sometimes feel like maybe if I'm having a busy week and I'm trying to do too many jobs for too many people, I worry that the quality might not be as good as if I just kind of concentrated on one thing at a time. So I do know what she's talking about there. But actually, Katie is a really good writer. She just chooses to do one thing over another. I mean, Love magazine, like all fashion magazines, is a visual item, okay? It's the pictures, let's face it, matter more than the words in Love. I think people buy it for the images rather than the writing. So for a writer, that's a little bit discouraging, but that's just the way of the world. And, you know, this is an interesting point as well. In fashion, the image makers are paid considerably more than the writers. So I always say to any aspiring journalists, look, okay, let's be realistic. You're not going to make a fortune. I still think you're going to do okay. It's better than digging a ditch, as they say, but it's not as good as being a photographer where, you know, sky's the limit when you're a fashion photographer working for big advertisers. You can make a fortune. You can make a fortune as a hairdresser or as a makeup artist in fashion more than you can a writer. And you know what does kind of get me slightly is that stylists, people that I've known for 20 years that have worked in London, are all buying huge, great big rambling Victorian houses in Hampstead and Islington and not even thinking twice about doing it because they are styling huge, great big campaigns for people and making a fortune. They've not even got mortgages. It's incredible how much a stylist can make. So it's a moot point, but it's an important point to make. I'm not saying that money's everything, but again, if you're thinking about being a stylist or a writer, let's be honest, you know, the financial consideration could be worth thinking about. Okay, the next person I spoke to was a gentleman called Hamish Bowles. Hamish, very dapper gentleman, who you're probably all aware of because you always see him in Vogue. He works for American Vogue. He's the European editor-at-large at American Vogue. Really nice guy, Hamish. I've known him for like 30 years. He used to work at Harper's and Queen in the UK in the 80s. Hamish is an aesthete, you know. He knows about good things, about nice things. He could tell you about architecture and art and really sort of special things. And he's taken that knowledge and made it himself, sort of created a role for himself. He sort of wanders around Europe, sort of taking photographs in big palaces in Vienna and Versailles and such. He's a very kind of knowledgeable man. But when I asked him this question, he was quick to point out that when I first knew him, he was the fashion editor at Harper's and Queen and did style and direct shoots, but he also wrote copy. So he thinks that he might be the exception to the rule. I dare say that Hamish is still better at one thing or another, although he does write quite beautifully, actually, but probably never gets a chance to do it as much as he would like. He's much more a visual person these days. But quite interesting that, you know, somebody is prepared to kind of stick their neck out and say, yes, I can do both. On the subject of Vogue, of course, famously, the editor-in-chief of American Vogue is the redoubtable Anna Wintour there, a woman that needs no introduction at all. You know, when you actually study Anna's history, you know, she started as a sittings editor, as a kind of fashion editor, doing shoots. She's not always been the boss yielding the whip and dealing with the publishing side. She actually was a fashion editor. But even she admits that she was never particularly good at the job. I don't think because she was untalented, but she was always conscious that there existed kind of high in the stratosphere stylists whose gifts she simply didn't have. She just was kind of honest enough to know that there were people better at it than her out there. But I wonder what those gifts are that she's talking about. What makes one picture of a dress seem humdrum and another one seem legendary? It's a kind of fine line, basically. How do you account for the visual imagination of great stylists? I don't think you can't be taught to be a stylist, and you can't really hope to achieve it in the future. Either you've got it, I believe, or you haven't got it. And if you've got it, you've had it from a very young age. So anybody out there that is thinking about styling, I would imagine that you've been thinking about it for a long time. It didn't just kind of pop up in your head yesterday. If you are thinking about it, with any luck, you'll meet a photographer with whom you share a sensibility, and you will immediately begin to produce pictures and images that stand out from the rest. It's a kind of chemistry that you have to have as a stylist. If you meet a photographer, it's either there or it's not. What that chemistry is, it's hard to define. Difficult to break down, really. It remains as elusive and as powerful as the chemistry of a good marriage, I suppose. The lady next to Anna, of course, is Grace Coddington, who is creative director of American Vogue. This is an image that she did a few years ago, which tells you everything about her kind of imagination in a shoot. This is a picture of Natalia going out to a Halloween party. This is her own baby. This is her apartment. This is how Grace's mind works. It's not just about putting a black dress on a model and getting her to stand there. She starts thinking about the whole story. There's a whole narrative going on. If Anna Wintour is the Pope, then Grace Coddington is Michelangelo trying to paint a fresh version of the Sistine Chapel 12 times a year. That's not my quote, I wish it was. That was Time magazine saying that. But I think anyone who saw her emerge as the insider secret to a fully fledged star in the September issue would agree with that. She is one of the world's legendary stylists, one of the best. For her, it's always cinematic. And I think this is a really good point to make about styling. There are not many creative people I've met in the industry that are not able to reference cinema. I think if you are a cinephile, if you love going to watch movies, and it's not just about action blockbusters, but art films, you'll be part of a band of people within fashion that are like-minded souls. Stephen Meisel, the great American photographer, for instance, nearly every single one of his shoots is almost based on some obscure film or other, some art film. Very famously references things like The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, where the film is all shot in kind of hues of purple, a bit like the color in this room when the lights are down. It's kind of art. Photography is a kind of form of cinema, a form of still life cinema. So lots of stylists and photographers take from the movies. It's interesting to note that. People like Polly Mellon, the great American stylist who used to work with Richard Avedon, she was the same. They all take from the silver screen. It's never literal. That would be a parody if someone just started to do, the Bonnie and Clyde look, or the Annie Hall look, or the Jessica Rabbit look. That would just be dumb. There's much more to it than that. There's a subtlety. And these stylists always, when I read about stylists or the people that I've actually met, they always refer to the girl, okay? They always put themselves in the place of the girl. If I was that girl, what would I be thinking? What's this girl's attitude? What has she just been doing? Has she just been kissed behind the bike shed? Or is she moneyed? They have to give her a kind of personality. And if they don't want to be that girl, they won't style her in that way. Do they know what's going on through the girl's mind? Now, the next lady is Sarah Mower. She's probably someone that, I don't know how many people know Sarah Mower. To my mind, she is one of the best writers in the UK, if not the world, actually. I'll stick my neck out and say that. She is undoubtedly one of the best writers around. She won Vogue's talent contest in the early 90s, I think. Vogue UK have a writing contest. I'd kind of encourage everybody here to go in for it. I've had a couple of students come very close to winning. It's not through me, it's through their own talent. It will get you places if you get highly ranked in that competition. Sarah won it one year, and she's gone from strength to strength. She's somebody that can capture the moment in her writing. She understands the business of fashion, the creativity involved in fashion. And she's written books about stylists. She's always got a lot to say. And she's always got this kind of like nice insider edge. Basically, she thinks that, it's just much more than putting clothes on a model. There's a bigger story at work. The stylists, she reckons, have the power to transcend fashion trends and to reflect something symbolic, to reflect something joyful, even chilling. If you look at, again, back to Stephen Meisel, he's portrayed through his collaborations, kind of commentary about the oil slick that happened off the Gulf of Mexico. If you look at Italian Vogue, they always do something kind of slightly kind of edgy. It's never about pretty floral dresses or about police brutality, or something in the news will be reflected within those fashion stories. Being a great stylist can be almost like being a film director. It doesn't have to be about, shall I put a black belt on those trousers? You've got to think beyond that. There's too many people putting pretty clothes on pretty models, and we don't need any more of that, really. If you want to make a name as a stylist with some integrity and some vision, you have to try something a little bit different. You have to find that kind of nuanced talent, if you like. Ian Webb is another name I spoke to, this guy here. Ian is ex-editor of the fashion editor of the Times in London, the Evening Standard. He famously was the fashion editor of a magazine in the 80s called Blitz. He was very interested in this talk I'm giving today, because he is a writer and a stylist, and he always believes that you can do both. Funnily enough, he said to me, isn't it interesting when I look back on my old shoots, a lot of the clothes have got writing on them. Somewhere down the line, I've always wanted to combine writing and fashion in one great big package. And when I look at it, all the slogans that I've had on T-shirts, all the text that I've had superimposed on images has kind of brought that to the forefront, basically. Another guy I spoke to, a colleague of mine, Dariush Haj-Najafi. Dariush is Anglo-Iranian, his father's Iranian, he's born in Britain. He is the style editor of Vice in the UK. Now, he's got a very interesting take. He thinks that it's really important to be good at both, okay? That you should be able to, he said specialization is a sexy thing, but there's no reason whatever that you can't do both. There is an element now within a magazine, if you are the fashion editor, that it's not just about styling. You sometimes have to art direct shoots. You sometimes have to write copy really quickly. You have to put the two things together. He's of the belief that, we should be looking at the complete package, whereas I'm always of the belief that you should have very separate kind of things going on. Maybe he's a younger generation working for kind of more youth-orientated magazines. He's seeing less of a separation, if you like. Carl Templer. This guy looks very good looking here. He's a bit younger there than he is now. Carl is an interesting stylist. I don't know whether you know his work. Carl's interesting in that he didn't train. This is one of his images. That was Justin Timberlake looking a bit beaten up. That was for a magazine called Arena en Plus in England. This image with the American flag and the fire and the violence that's implied here was actually banned because the magazine was meant to come out on the 11th of September 2001, so that was pretty bad timing. So those images were never published. But this is an example of not being orthodox in your kind of styling techniques. But Carl started work in a shop. For anybody that's got any aspirations to be a stylist or be anything, don't think that you have to go and do a degree or you have to study for years to do something. You can literally be working in a high-end clothes shop and be inspired as he was. He worked for a company called Woodhouse in the UK, a kind of high-end menswear shop. And seeing men come in, fitting them with suits, that's the way he got started. But he knew that he wasn't part of the kind of fashion hierarchy. He came from a kind of working class background. He knew that he didn't have what it takes or that insider fashion history or knowledge. What he did was take ordinary things like Converse boots, Levi's, aviators, things that were already established as being kind of stylish, and made something through them. He was fascinated with the imagery of Bruce Weber, that kind of all-American, clean-cut thing that happened in the late 80s, early 90s, and kind of made it his own. Okay, let's move on to some ladies. Now, Emmanuelle Alt is the editor of Paris Vogue, someone that I've been lucky enough to be on set with and see how she works. She's a very good example of a fashion editor styling a shoot that really what the shoot is an extension of themselves, okay? So, French Vogue do this kind of like rock and roll, kind of like very insouciant, chic thing. It's not really what French women wear. If you go to Paris, people aren't wearing what they have in French Vogue, but it's that kind of rock and roll glamour that French Vogue embody now. So she's very much like the girl that you see on the pages is the girl that Emmanuelle aspires to be or is. I mean, she's so popular as a fashion editor and stylist now that they call it the cult of alt. You see groupies trying to copy her look. In a similar way, Corinne Reutfeld, she was Emmanuelle's predecessor. She had that same thing, okay? It was about rock and roll chic. Everybody wanted to look like Corinne or dress like her at least. And the funny thing was, for all her kind of rock and roll credentials, and her kind of, she was never a punk, for instance, and she admits that. She's never taken drugs. She's got kids who used to go home every night and have an early night. But that's not the image that she was portraying in her pictures. And a very extraordinary image there from Kareem. Just wanted to mention a very obvious name now, Kate Moss, okay? Obviously known as one of the world's greatest models, but of course in recent years she has not done as much modeling and she's turned her hand to styling. I just put that image in there because I thought it kind of would be nice to kind of show the transition. She's a contributing fashion editor to English Vogue now. I think we've got an image of hers so basically Kate's doing what Corinne and Emmanuelle do, is that they actually put themselves into the picture, even though Daria doesn't exactly look like Kate. When you look at the styling and the attitude, it's about putting yourself into the picture. So for a budding stylist, again, it's very important to think, what I'm doing to the model, is that what I would do to myself? If you can give something of yourself to the pictures, I think that makes them all the more credible. Okay. I think the exception to the rule of all of them is a very good friend of mine called Luella Bartley. I don't know if we have an image of Luella somewhere here. She is a designer, a stylist, and a writer, and she's extremely good at all of them. She comes from a kind of journalistic background. She left St. Martin's, she went to work for the Evening Standard, and then she went to work at British Vogue. And she was really, really good at writing. She met Katie Grand, and for a bet, when they were coming home from a party drunk one night, Katie said, "Why don't you do your own collection, Luella?" And she did, and it was really successful. And she went on to become British Fashion Designer of the Year a couple of years ago. And then the company imploded and went bankrupt, and she's gone back to writing now, but very successfully. She writes books. She has written for Vogue recently, and to top it all off, she's quite sickening really, she's just been taken on as design director for Marc Jacobs. So she's kind of gone full circle about twice, so she can be a great designer, great stylist, and obviously a great writer as well. So I think Luella probably is the cat that got the cream. She is the proof that you can do everything if you've got maybe contacts and a little bit of confidence as well. Okay, so writing tips. I think for people aspiring to be writers, there would be a few things that I would encourage you to do. I think it's an innate thing. For anybody that wants to be a writer, you've got to want to do it, okay? You've got to actually think to yourself, wake up in the morning and not be frightened of writing, okay? It's got to be something that you feel passionate about. I always say, try to kind of like behave like an old school reporter. Try and seek out stories. Try and talk to people that you wouldn't normally speak to. Don't rely on the internet too much. I think it's a good idea to be nosy as well, okay? You know, ask lots of questions. Even if people think you're a bit weird, ask lots of questions all the time. Don't be frightened of searching for stories. And don't be shy. You know, I've never met a shy journalist. I just don't think they exist. You can't kind of hide behind, you know, a sort of little frightened rabbit act. It doesn't work. You have to be kind of bold, ask questions, get out there and see what you can find, basically. And you have to practice. Why do people think you're going to get better if you don't write every day? People say blogs are kind of had their day. Well, if they have, I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing. That's a whole other talk, really. But at least it's an outlet for you to put your thoughts down every day and try to get some feedback. And practice makes perfect. And read other people's work. I don't think I was very good for about the first 6 or 7 years of my career, and it's only when I really started to read who I thought were good writers that by a process of kind of osmosis, it kind of seeps into your skin. Yeah, it kind of gets there eventually. You don't realize it's happening until you suddenly start writing beautiful sentences, and eventually it works. If you're the other flip side of the coin, and you want to be a stylist, there are a few things that I think you should think about. It's about having the right attitude. You have to have drive, okay? You have to be motivated. It takes determination and focus and patience to build a reputation. Rome wasn't built in a day. You really have to keep working at it. Be a team player. There's no room for divas. Believe me, people will not want to work with you or for you. A very obvious thing, but you know, go and do as much work experience as possible. Intern at as many places as possible. Experience goes a very, very long way. And you know, if you're a stylist, you need to build up a portfolio. I told you that story about me hawking around 5 very badly produced pictures. Well, you need to have a lot more than that, and they have to be industry standard. It's a lot easier to take an image these days than it used to be. Anybody can point and shoot. It's all done in post-production now. So if you're going to take pictures around, they have to be polished. You can't have some raw, grainy black and white pictures unless that was the aesthetic you were going for. Don't underestimate the knowledge that you'll need as well. Okay? Immerse yourself in trends. You're going to need to know exactly what's going on there. And networking as well. Some people visibly blanch at the idea of networking, but you know what? Even though I'm not that keen on doing it, whenever I do it, it comes up trumps. It's worth trying. You need to start testing with young photographers. You need to start making those connections. Okay? And when you do, things will start to eventually happen. Don't just go for glamorous jobs as well. Keep open-minded as to kind of what type of work you want to do. Remember, there's more than one kind of stylist out there. There is commercial stuff you can do. There is video stuff. There is kind of consultancy stuff when you get to that stage. But not all of it is kind of the glamorous high-end thing. So open yourself up to kind of all kinds of opportunities. Okay, I'm getting the nod here to maybe take some questions from the audience. Does anybody have anything to ask me at this stage? All very quiet. Anybody got any questions? Who fancies being a stylist in the room? Anybody? Any got any fledgling stylists here at all?
I wanted to ask you about like the ethics of fashion writing, because I know that when you get into these professions, when lifestyle, travel, fashion, like you do get a lot of perks, maybe gifts and things like that, which like in my field of news, you can't accept. And I'm wondering, like, what is your advice or what's your strategy for dealing with that? Because when you do receive a gift from someone you're writing about, it's very hard to be critical or to write honestly, or a free trip somewhere, let's say, to you know, like you were saying, your travel right.
Yeah.
When you're invited, it's different than when you pay out of pocket.
Well, you can accept gifts. There's no contract that says you have to say you like them in the copy. I mean, I think that's the kind of payoff between PR and journalists, is that you'll accept a trip or accept something free, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to write in gilded terms about it. My thing about writing is that I believe that you should always tell the unvarnished truth about anything. What's the point of writing kind of fluff, puff pieces that aren't really what you're thinking? Just always be really honest. You run the risk, of course, of never getting invited on another trip or not getting another gift from that PR, but I'd rather have that and keep my integrity than be sort of, you know, somebody's servant, if you like. I'd say the best thing would be to steer clear of that kind of transaction if you feel ethically it is wrong. Having said that, you get a lot of gifts without even having to write about things, so that's quite nice. Then you don't feel so guilty about it. But you know what? If someone invites you to a destination, unless it's absolutely appalling, there's always something that you can say about it. I always try to look for the positive aspect, but I would tell the truth as well. Somebody else had their hand up somewhere in that region. This lady down here.
So I had a very good teacher at university, and he always taught me about being realistic with my career expectations. How do you make writing, which is sometimes seen as a hobby, into a career, especially as a freelancer?
Good question. Again, it's different for everybody. Again, I think you need a break, and you have to kind of create breaks for yourself. Without being too brazen and too annoying and too in your face, you have to contact as many people as you can. I do think it boils down to not begging, but going to see. When I was doing my work experience, I knocked on doors. I wasn't sending out fancy letters or emails. I literally would find out where the office was and knock on the door and put my head around the corner. There's something to be said for kind of human contact, you know, and getting that lucky break. There's a lot to be said for luck as well, being in the right place at the right time. That's happened for me. Last time I was here, I was talking about all those kind of lucky aspects to getting a break. But I think it's dogged determination, being tenacious, following up leads. But also, you know, if it's about writing, then for goodness sake, do some writing and make sure it's as good as it possibly can be. And don't be satisfied with just handing in something that, you know, in a kind of very perfunctory way. It's not good enough, really. But unfortunately, a lot of people aren't good enough. That's what it boils down to. And I think you've got to be big enough and realistic enough to know that possibly if you're straining to write anything or produce anything of any worth, then perhaps it's not quite the right profession for yourself. And if you learn that at a young age, you do have the opportunity to move on and do something else. But I would say, you know, without wanting to put you off from doing writing or styling or one thing or the other, is at any point in your life, really, have a go at it. You know, at least say to yourself, I did a couple of days on set. It wasn't for me. I didn't like teamwork. I don't feel very creative. Clothes aren't really my world. I'm much better sitting there at a screen, pouring my thoughts out. Be kind of honest about what you're good at. Am I the teacher you were referring to, Cressida? That's nice to know, isn't it? So, lady up there at the back.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
I actually do both things.
Do you?
I do.
Good.
And I learned from a very young age that you have to try your hardest at absolutely everything.
Okay.
And you have to be willing to do absolutely anything to learn your craft. And I don't think there's anything to say that you can't do anything that you don't want to do, and you can combine the two. If you're an artistic person and if you believe in what you've been, what has inspired you for the many, many years, there's nothing to say that you can't be a great stylist and a great writer at the same time. No. And I think both go hand in hand.
Sure.
So I think, though, if you're going to go into this industry, you need to be able to do things. You need to be able to turn your hand to anything, and you need to be absolutely up for doing anything at all and being the most non-glamorous person on the shoot possible.
Well, I do love it when you see I believe you, and I do think, there are instances where people can be very good at both, but I think you've got to have the time to do both, and it depends where you take yourself and where you work. But I come across instances, not just in fashion or writing, but, look at Rupert Everett, the actor. He's a fine actor, he's won awards and everything. He's also the most brilliant writer. If you read his books, he's hilarious. He's got a really good style of writing. And where does that come from? He's an actor, so he's not trained as a writer. It's innate, basically. You're probably innately good at both of those things. And I wouldn't try to discourage people from doing both. It's just that when I came across before, probably quite arrogantly saying, I don't believe people can be good at both, that's just in my experience that I haven't found that. But the examples that I gave you were kind of contradictory to that. So it can work both ways. Okay, I'm getting the nod that we should finish there. So, just one last question here, quickly. I did. That's quite a controversial statement. Blogs have had their time. I think they've probably plateaued, let's put it that way. And I think if there were any statistics out there, they would probably see that it went like that, and it's going like that, and it might have dipped a little bit. It's just all to do with, the novelty factor, if you like. That period has kind of come and gone now, and they've become commonplace. So you're always going to see a dip. But I should think there are still billions of people in the world doing them, and just as many people reading them as well. I just think they're a tremendous platform for a young writer to get their work out there. Why would you not want to put it out there and potentially have a lot of people read what you've got to say? It might not be the intended audience, but at least it's an outlet. So I wasn't meaning to say that they'd had their day. I just think they are not as kind of newsworthy or as kind of dynamic as they once were. Okay, all right, guys. Thank you very much for staying the course. Cool.